comments?
Amy, are you available?
Hi, Kim. It's Matt. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Good.
Good. Okay, we are ready for you when you are.
Okay.
Well, why don't you start by introducing yourself and then lead us through the report?
Fantastic. All right. Thank you. So Matt Montalvo from Drescher Malecki. We do the external audit for the Rochester Construction School Facilities Joint Construction Board. What I have for you, I'm going to try to share my screen. And all right. Let's see that. Does everybody see that?
And you're also the auditor for the school district.
Yep. So we do it in conjunction with the audit for the Rochester City School Districts, being a component unit of the school district, the Joint Schools Construction Board. We do a standalone audit and a standalone report. So that's our objective today, is to give you a summary and the results of that audit. So I'll take you through an overview of our presentation. If there's any questions throughout, feel free to stop. And I can address those questions. So kind of getting into the presentation, some of the products of our audit, we'll share our required communications here today with the group. But really our objective is to provide an opinion on the basic financial statements. So those are the required governmental financial statements that within that required format that you're required to present as an entity, and then you contract with a third party accounting firm to provide an opinion. Do the financial statements fairly represent your financial position and results of operations? So we'll talk a little bit about the format and the presentation of the financials, as well as our opinion. Like I said in the last slide, our responsibility under generally accepted auditing standards is to form and express an opinion. So we don't take responsibility for the preparation of the books and the records or maintaining the books and records. All of those transactions are the responsibility of the Joint Schools Construction Board and the school district to maintain those records and provide those so we can perform an audit in accordance with our standards. As far as the significant policies from an accounting standpoint or estimates, those are disclosed in the notes to the financial statements. Not a lot of significant estimates. Once we show the format of the financials, you'll see there's not a lot of significant estimates within the financials, and no real changes in the accounting policies from year to year to note. As far as independence, that's a requirement in accordance with our standards. We need to be free of conflicts of interest with not only the school district, but also the Rochester Joint Schools Construction Board. That's what allows our auditors to be skeptical and objective in performing our audit tests, and then ultimately providing that opinion on the financial statements. And then as far as other matters, we didn't have any difficulties in performing the audit. If we had any disagreements with management or staff, or any difficulties with the scope of getting documentation and performing our tests, we would have to bring that to this group and disclose that. But I'm happy to report that we did not have any difficulties in performing our audit. And we were able to get to the point where we can issue an audit opinion. So we do plan on moving forward with what's referred to as an unmodified opinion, or a clean opinion on the financial statements. So we believe that the books, the records, and the financial statements of the Rochester Joint Schools Construction Board are fairly stated and fairly represent your financial position as of the year ended June 30th, 2024. Any questions on those before we get into some of the highlights of the financials?
Amy, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Okay, so just a quick overview of the basic financial statements, and maybe I can hop in between the draft document and the presentation. But as I said before, you're required in accordance with Government Accounting Standards Board statements to present because you're considered a government entity under the accounting standards, you're required to present your information in accordance with those government auditing standards and government accounting standards. So when we look at your financial statements, the two financials that are presented are the statement of net position and statement of activities. So can everybody see that financial statement there?
Well, in terms of reading the number, see the presentation.
Yep, see the presentation. Perfect. So this is essentially the format and the requirement for the financial statements where you have the RJSCB fund and then on the government-wide, the statement of net position. And when you look at the components of this is essentially a snapshot at June 30th, 2024 of your assets, liabilities, and then your equity position, which is in some forms of fund balance, and then it converts to a government-wide net position. And that's the requirements of the government standards, is to kind of present it in these two different ways. Not always the most straightforward as far as, translating it, but essentially what this shows is your net position is your equity position at the year ended June 30th, 2024. So that's the amount your assets exceed your liabilities. So your primarily your assets encompasses the cash or restricted cash that you hold to perform the project expenditures. So your capital outlay as you move forward into phase 3 of these projects, that cash, any cash you have on hand is considered restricted for those projects or that facilities modernization program. On the liability side, you have some bills that cross years. That's the accounts payable. For June, as of 2024, you did have an amount due to the Rochester City School Districts. And what that represents, about $4.2 million, is the amount that's advanced to get the project going. So before you go and obtain that permanent financing, once the project really ramps up, the school districts advances those funds to get the planning phase expenditures of the project and essentially finance and provide a source of funding for your projects. And then what's remaining is essentially the amount that in your equity position going forward. So the statement of activities being the other statement, this more shows, again, the revenues or inflows versus your expenditures or outflows. Really, what we show is the only real revenues right now is interest income that you're earning on those deposits. And then any of that financing, once you go to permanent financing and issue those bonds, you'll see those inflows come in and essentially create a fund balance or net position until it's spent. So the $2.8 million, 2.9 of capital outlay, those are the expenditures that occurred during 2024, project expenditures. That reduces your net position or fund balance. So going back to the presentation. As I mentioned, some of the highlights for June 30th, 2024 did have some increased activities as compared to the prior year, but you're still in those planning phases of the project. Once that really ramps up you'll obtain that permanent financing and be able to really get into the core of the project going forward. We talked about the assets and the liabilities and your fund balance and net position. Again, restricted for future capital projects or the capital outlay. The biggest portion due back to the school district, that $4.2 million. It is considered a liability until you obtain that financing and essentially pay that money back, and then you won't need to borrow as you go. So it is kind of a unique entity from a financial statement standpoint because really a lot of that financing is from other sources, whether it be through financing or the school district or the city. And then you're in charge of essentially, making sure the project gets done and is, managed correctly. So from an audit standpoint, like I said, we issued an unmodified opinion. We look at the books of record, make sure it accurately reflects the financials of the entity. So we plan on moving forward, like I said, with that unmodified opinion. If there's any questions on those, we can take them at this time, but that's essentially the overview of the audit.
One of the things that Matt mentioned is that we don't fit neatly into the accounting concepts here.
Correct.
This is not an entity. It doesn't exist as a corporation, even as a public corporation like the district. So we don't build up equity. We don't have issues of that nature. When you think about it, everything we touch is restricted. Because even ultimately, when the bonds are issued and we raise cash that way, he is committed to those specific projects. So there really isn't anything that we handle here that isn't going to be restricted in some fashion. Either through the statute that creates us or the practice of the plans that we go through.
Yep.
It is useful. It is important and useful to us to confirm these accounts and confirm the money. It's useful in terms of predicting where you're going because of the nature of what we do here and what we're doing. And also one other factor that influences it, and that is where these projects are run in a separate project. By that I mean phase 2 is separate from phase 3. And it's created by separate legislation and there's separate commitments of money to it. They don't touch that. They just look at the whole process as it sits without trying to divide it into 2 and 3. Because some of the money that's in the accounts here will eventually go back into phase 2 and pay down debt. Because it's committed to phase 2 and it's not available to us to spend ultimately in phase 3. That said, what you want is a clean audit. We got one. So it is important in that respect, sir.
Yep.
Any comments? Okay, we need to move to accept the audit. Make a motion. To move. Second. Any further questions or comments? Not. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, folks. I appreciate you joining us.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your accommodations too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get this into the action items. The first of the action items is the minutes of the previous meeting on December 9th. They were in the packet that was distributed along with everything else. Any comments or questions about them? Seeing or hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the December 9th meeting.
So moved.
Moved. Second. Any questions or comments? Hearing, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, the requisition, Joan.
Yeah. Okay. So for January, we've got payments to Anshin totaling $9,016.50. Payments to Bond, Shomick, and King totaling $1,372.50. Payment to Bridgewater totaling $257.94. Payment to Dressler and Malecki totaling $10,250. Payment to Labella Associates totaling $232,077.28. Payment to Lawley Construction Solutions totaling $50. Payment to Savin Engineers totaling $374,292.45. A payment to SWBR Architecture, Engineering, and Landscape Architecture PC totaling $186,271. And lastly, a payment to Watts Architecture and Engineering totaling $342,375. Total payments of $1,155,962.67. Any questions?
Seeing none, then we'll entertain a motion to approve it. Moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions? Not everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
And that gets us to the closeout of the Watts agreement. Kevin, you want to tell us a little bit about what that is?
So Watts Architecture and Engineering was retained by the board to provide technical support during the development of the strategic plan for phase 3 in 2 stages. Step 1 was completed and closed out several months ago. Step 2, the work associated with step 2 has been completed recently. We're simply waiting for a final report from Watts on a mini master plan for the playfield at Edison Tech, which they're working on. To be more specific, Watts is incorporating comments we sent to them, in addition to adjustments being made by their estimator, Trophy Point. So we're asking the board to approve a reduction in Watts' final fee with a deduct amendment of $55,935 to close out this particular contract. And there's a memo in your packet that explains.
The money obviously is not cash. It's the budget, adjustment of the budget, so we would budget it, that 55 in there to know where we were going if we went forward. And the good news is we didn't spend it all. So it goes back into the pot in terms of ultimate availability, but it isn't recapturing cash. Questions or comments about that? It's good to get one close now. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve it. Any questions or comments? We're hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Next, we have an insurance waiver.
So SWBR is the architect of record at Wilson High School. SWBR and its consultant IDC Engineering are looking for a partial waiver of 2 insurance items. There's a memo in your packet as well that explains what we're asking the board for. The first item is to accept the industry standard lower medical expense limit in their general liability policy. And the second is to accept a general aggregate umbrella policy instead of a per project. So we reviewed those requests with the board's insurance consultant, Lawley Insurance Services, and they support accepting the policy limits that were provided by SWBR.
Questions or comments on this? This is the kind of thing we're going to be dealing with regularly here for a while. Okay, seeing or hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Good. Okay, that takes care of the items that require us to vote and take action on, but we do have several reports today that I think it's important that the board get up to speed on. But we'll do the fund balance report first, and then go to the ICO report.
Thank you, Chairman Richards. The budget report or fund balance report for this month displays the last disbursement of $1.2 million. That gave us a starting balance of $1,299,918.73. When the current pay requisition is subtracted, that leaves a balance of $143,956.06. Total amount expended to date is $5,339,042. There was a resolution presented to the Board of Ed for an advancement of another $8.4 million. In light of the current pay requisitions and the expenditures with the recent procurements, we are going to be submitting another memo to the Board of Ed for additional funding coming up very shortly. This budget shows a deficit of $1,474,618.26. And again, that is showing because the budgets have not been adjusted. We will be presenting an adjusted budget for the February meeting, and then separately a new report showing the actuals against budget for expenditures.
Yeah, we all, budget, recent round of bids that we received with respect to, with respect to Edison. And, will give us a better sense of the money that we're going to be spending with respect to the design, which will go on for basically the next year. So we can update the budget to reflect those things. That, of course, is where the real money is. So we need to get on top of it. But we'll have some pretty reliable numbers with respect to that by next month, and therefore can present a budget with those numbers in. Okay. The ICO, there was some material in the packet that was circulated to you that gives some sense of how Lansing is going to run this and the report that they're submitting. I wanted you to hear this so that you get, everybody on the board gets prepared for the kind of reporting that we can expect once this thing gets rolling. Obviously, it has not been to date. We're not talking about a lot of employment, but once we get going on the construction, there'll be substantial employment. This substantial review with respect to Hanson about whether or not they're complying with the number of requirements that they've agreed to. And what we're going to hear here this morning is how it's going to get done. What's the process by which we're going to keep track of it, and what kind of reporting we can expect. So with that, thank you. Are you in front of a microphone over there? You're not. You need to
Just swing it over.
Thank you. This one that doesn't work that great.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? There we go. Thank you. Before we get into our monthly report, you'll see this every month that we'll be presenting now going forward as contracts are awarded and work's being done. What I'd first like to do is go through what are the policies and procedures that Anshin does on a monthly basis with all of the documentation, how it's stored, and what we do. So in your agenda, there is, I condensed it down to an 8-page high-level summary of what it is. And what I want to do is just kind of walk through the different steps that we do to verify ultimately all of the numbers here so that there's full transparency to what we refer to stakeholders, whether it be the board or anybody else can ultimately see it. So when we go through the numbers, after being retained for phase 3 and we were on for phase 1 and 2, we ultimately did a capacity study, went out and saw what prior capacity numbers were, what do workforce numbers look like, what do DBE numbers look like, made recommendations. Ultimately, they were approved and went into your master plan, and now we're tracking against that information that's there. Let's start out at the bidding process. When a firm, either a professional service firm or a construction firm is bidding any work, we'll work with them. So if it's a professional service contract, in excess of $25,000, they have MWBE requirements that they have to report to us, as well as workforce information. If it's a construction contract, $100,000 or greater, they have MWBE requirements and workforce requirements on the reporting side as well. A contractor, if they cannot meet the goals, can ask for a waiver on that. And there's a process for that. And if that's only happened once in the life of the projects, then that's brought to the board for discussion as to what it is and if there are, and what are the reasons for that. One of the things that we do in that process is what's called good faith efforts. So we're tracking with them when they're awarded the bid, what are their efforts to ultimately make sure they're going to be able to meet their clients, track that. So we work with them on that. One of the things that we work with on all of the contractors, the bidders, and that is at Anshin, we have a proprietary database where we take the state's certified MWBE list and then update it where we have financial information, bonding information, largest contracts that they've worded on and other ones, and then geocode that information so that when a bidder or a contractor is looking for certified firms, we can say geographically within 50 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles, whatever size they want of the site, here's everybody who's certified. What's important to know is we get into the NAICS codes. The NAICS codes are where you have your certification. Each certified firm does to provide a particular type of work. So then we pull the NAICS codes out. There are over 10,000 in the database of firms, 10,000 codes. Then we look at it to make sure that if there's an electrical contractor who is looking to subcontract low voltage and they anticipate it being approximately a $500,000 contract, subcontract where they're looking to work to get their MWBE or DBE requirements, that we're referring out to them firms that can do a job of that size and have the NAICS code to ultimately be able to do it. So we'll give them lists and they have to verify that they actually reached out to those firms. They ultimately aren't able to meet their goals. They reached out to them and what were the reasons why, if they weren't able to meet their goals as to what they were. So that's in the tracking process as the bids are going out. They each six with your bid, and then the ultimately successful bidder has a different forms that they fill out for us. One of the forms has their plan in it. When we look at their plan as to how they're ultimately, we call it their roadmap, how are they going to get to their goals? So when we look at our goals, the goals for phase 3 are on the workforce side, minority, both male and female, 23%, women only 7%. And then when we look at what we call the business utilization, so this is where they're subcontracting out with certified firms, the MBE requirement is 18%, the WBE requirement is 12%, the SBE is 2%, and the DBE is 2%. And I'll go through our numbers when we finish here as to where we currently are on contracts that are awarded and with work that has been done on that. So then we get into the verification process. So on the 15th of every month, everyone who has a contract with the board and any of their subcontractors upload to what's called Huddle, a virtual file cabinet that secured all of their documentation that we review. And then after reviewing that, we make that presentation to you at the following next month that talks about it. So some of the things that we're looking for is their contract, their subcontracts. What is the wording of the scope in the subcontracts if they're certified firms to make sure that they do have the proper NAICS codes that would ultimately allow credit for this. Keep in mind that under Article 415A, there is a statewide director who can audit these type programs. So we want to make sure that all the time, anytime we're giving credit to a certified firm, it's credit for work that they have a NAICS code in. So we go through that information for them and work with them to be able to do it. We require every prime contractor to submit this, they attest to it, and then they also give us their certified payrolls. So that's how we're tracking their workforce numbers. So we have their contract, their subcontract, the certified payrolls of their workforce who work on the site. And then that also gives us the both race and gender and compensation fully weighted because of the prevailing rates as to what they are. So at any given point, if someone wanted to know dollar amounts to a contract, dollar amounts to a different sub or particular type of contract, wages paid by race or gender on the project, we report that monthly, track it for them. Please.
How do you sort it? Is it a paycheck? Certified?
So we get their New York State Department of Labor certified payroll. So the reason why DOL does it as certified crime because they're submitting it to the state or a government entity. So they're actually attesting to the fact that the wages are there that they're reporting are true and accurate as to what they are for the proof of payment.
Of taxation. So for us, it's a good number to use because consequence of monkeying around with that number is pretty severe.
It's a felony each time.
Yeah.
So you'll see those highlighted.
It'll lead to their problems.
And so we ultimately then track that information back. But yes, it's through their, and then, but it's also tied back to their pay app. So when they send their pay app into their monthly voucher or requisition into the program management in there, they have their lien release, we get their certified payrolls, we get their documentation, we work then with program management to pull that out to make sure that subs ultimately are being paid. And then we can track that back through to make sure that a subcontractor has been properly paid and the subcontractor's scope of service that they're providing, they have the NAICS code for, so the program is taking credit, properly taking credit for any work that's being done by a certified. So on the document management side, what we do is Huddle is the software we use. It's a virtual file cabinet. It's very secure. Professional service firms, law firms, accounting firms who used to move documents back and forth. It allows the subcontractor to upload their own records or the contractor to upload both their and their subs. It allows the contractor to look at their subs paperwork, but that's all they can look at. Can't look at anybody else. We can assign permissions to that program management. If anybody on the board would like to look at any of it, it's all available to ultimately be able to see. And you would see the breakdown per contractor and their subs to that. And like I said, that information is due to Anshin on the 15th of the month. We start calling you that day if we don't have it and work with you to make sure that we have it ultimately included in it. And we start this process out as soon as a bid is awarded. We sit in on the interview process and then on the de-scoping to make sure that the successful bidders, even before they're going to contract, know what their responsibilities are and what they have to do. And then we follow it up and they get a letter. So if you're one of the trade contractors, here's your requirements. If you're professional service, here's what yours are. The significant difference in the two between professional services and trades, there aren't certified payrolls on the professional services. So we don't get the wage information, we get the demographic information, but not the wage information from professional service firms. We go through it. We then take all that data, we do the analysis on it, and then ultimately be able to report that out to the board on a monthly basis. And we go through both the business utilization, so that's our participation by certified firms, and our workforce numbers, which is our the actual individuals that are working on it. There's a series of forms that they fill out every month that as we're tracking that information that they have. And we follow up with them. You'll see when we start getting into more, actively in the construction side, if someone doesn't get their paperwork in, we still do a monthly report. And then the next month, you'll see where additional hours were reflected or additional dollars for someone who didn't get their or wasn't able to get their paperwork in. Often it's on the subcontracting side and we work with them, make it as easy as possible so they can ultimately get all that information in. On the workforce.
Ultimately.
And that is.
We don't do that if we don't have to, but it's important that they not get very far behind. So once you start drifting behind with this reporting, then, maybe things aren't going as well as they should be. And if there's a problem, you want to know about it.
To that point, it only happened once, phase one. And what we did is we had the check cut and brought to program management. It was locked up until they turned in their paperwork, which, as you can imagine, got everybody's attention, and they did it quickly. But at that point, they were out for months. And then the other time, so we make sure we get it monthly. We also want to make sure before any final retainage and everything else is paid out that they have all their compliance paperwork in. So at the end of the day, some of the firms, we're in the high 98, low 99% of having the documentation in. And often at some of the smaller firms, something stumbles or something, and there may be an issue. We have been asked in the past, and we have that information all available as we track the workforce. So you have the race, gender, and all of the wage information. And then we also break it out by city residents. So we can actually show you the dollars that are paid to trades workers within the city and outside of it. So in the COMIDA, we have the 9 counties that the workforce has to come from. So we track that as well. That's another important part of looking at the workforce information and the certified payrolls to make sure that the workforce from the 9 county region that they like I said, monthly, you'll get the report with all of the analysis in it. We also bring the board's attention any challenges that a contractor may be having. We're having a challenge with someone's paperwork, and then we come up with ultimately a plan to be able to correct that as to where we are on that. Because of the fact that they're giving us their information, so the report tonight that I'm giving you, this information was supplied to us on December 15th. It was their November payroll. So to the chairman's point, we want to make sure they stay on top of it. The process alone, you're 45 days into it. By the time we close out a month, they get the paperwork to us and we present to it. So it's another reason why it's important that we get that all over to them. So at a high level, that's the steps we go through. We try not to make it overly bureaucratic or paperwork, but end of the day, we're an accounting firm and we need the backup documentation so it's available for everybody. And we've often had stakeholders, individuals that want to know specific information, and the database is live. We pull it out fairly quickly for you.
Couple things about the why of this. There are 2 sort of types of reporting that go on here. The initial reporting, which will come in a letter or a memo to us when we start approving the construction contracts, is that Anson says they reviewed the proposal from the contractor on how they're going to meet the MDE requirements, not only meet the numbers, but how they're going to do it, and whether there are any problems there. So we start out knowing where we stand, and someone's looked at this other than simply having the documents. Second kind of reporting is during the course of the project itself. That's what he was talking about once we had. It's important because not only do we need integrity in the process here, but we also ensure that if we're that we develop a problem here, we know about it, deal with it. And sometimes it's unavoidable. There are times when it's not something that we can deal with effectively. And that may happen to us. Giving contracts with large amount of material, elevators, basically single source kind of stuff that goes into the school district. That's the second thing, and that we get these reports on all the way during the course of the project. For each of the, you'll know where each of these contracts stand. Nobody else is doing this. I mean, we're the only people around who are dealing with this stuff in this level of detail, in this level of checking. But it's a high profile project. They got money put into it. And it's important because it's also large. Last year, I think in phase 2, we had what, over 1 million hours. Million work hours. So these are very total. These are very substantial projects. But we need to be, we need to be on top of it. Number one, we need to have integrity. Number 2, and so it is highly bureaucratic, but it nonetheless makes sure that we know what's going on.
Yeah, if you look at phase one and phase two, a total of 3 million hours total, hours all in on it. And as the chairman mentioned, we do a letter recommending to the board the award of a contract after our analysis. And if there is a contractor that's not able to meet their goals stated, it gives you the ability to make management decisions because they may be a low bidder, maybe some bidding reasons or something. You can make a decision on how you do that. You also get to do that as an understanding of where we stand because our goals are for overall for the whole project. But sometimes on the bidding side, there may be a management decision where you want to do something slightly different and you have the information to be able to make that decision.
And one of the advantages that we had with Anthony is been doing this for a while and really involving data. We hope they're able to help people. You know, if they're unable to meet these requirements, they can try this, they can try that. There are people that have been working on the project who are doing well and might be useful to you. Count on. So that kind of advice or that kind of interaction is part of what we hope comes from this. Okay, the report.
Well, one quick, Brian, can you
Please.
just talk quickly about the work that you do with change orders as part of your ongoing monitoring? that
Thank
the
you.
project kicks off?
Yes. So I just talked about the process, but we also look at change orders. Because, change orders can significantly impact a particular contractor's contract, up or down, depending on what it is. And then we track that as against where are they on their plan, because they still have their obligation to their goals. But all of a sudden, if there was $100,000 change order, additional work being done, still have those goals. And how do you get that done? So then we work with them on that. First of all, that they know they have their requirements under their contract, even for the change order side of it. How do they ultimately deal with it? And what's the best way? And often what will happen is maybe on the change order, there's not the capacity because of timing or something else that they're not going to have their MWBE participation. Then they got to relook at other work that they haven't done under the contract to make sure that they still are able to hit their goals. And we track that back and forth. And that's working, with administration and program management on those change orders. We see them coming through. There is an impact to the contract and therefore is an impact to their requirements under the MWBE numbers.
That's an example of doing things during the course of the project. People have been waiting for the end. A lot of this stuff is done in other circumstances. There's an agreement in the beginnings, and then the next thing you hear about it is when the job is done. And of course, if you wait till the job is done, there's nothing to do about it. So we focus on that, we go along, and change order is an event that requires attention. It's sure that
Are there any clauses that are going to be in effect for contractors? I've seen. Got 14 months. Got $52 million budget. He's not going to.
So the issue there in the industry would be liquidated damages, as I look over at Ed. But what happens is what we do is it's anytime that someone's falling short, because we're monitoring on a monthly basis, we bring it to their attention. We've also brought it, if you realize that they're really struggling, they said they were going to get most of their participation early on in the contract. They're 50% on and they're not there. How are they going to do it later on? If they were trying to say they were going to get it in demo or the build out phase of it is to do that. So by monitoring it monthly, we're then reporting it. We do then bring that in to make sure. We've often had to call them in for a meeting and then we bring them in to sit with someone from program management. What is your corrective action plan going to be? You're 20% through $1 million contract and you're not hitting those as to where they are so that we ultimately know. And by doing it, each one of them, and there are some that have struggled as to what we call a corrective action plan. How are you going to get this adjusted? At the end of the day, we get some that have fallen short, and there's been some reasons for that. We highlight those as to what they are, but there hasn't been any significant shortages from what their plan was. that didn't have, that sometimes it was a significant change order was going to drive it, and there just wasn't capacity at the end to be able to do that. They got a, $250,000 increase on the contract, and there's not enough time.
There's a legal issue here too. Technically, the way in which these kinds of requirements can be imposed is that they're goals, not arbitrary, they're goals. So if you were to, for instance, have a financial penalty, you'd make it, you would run up against the limitations with respect to the law on enforcement. And we're close because we're, as you can tell here, we have a very meaningful program. And that's one of the things we need to think about, why we need to work on this, collectively as we go along. So that we get arbitrary about this, just try to push on the numbers. A lot of them bring the whole figure, and create a set of circumstances in which we're not going to be able to make any kind of progress. But I think the other place it comes into bear is that we have a fair amount of work that we award, and we award that over 3 years, 4 years. If you're having, if we're not cooperating and you're not really trying, and that's probably it for you. And it's fair to consider that. It's fair to consider that, just like we consider the quality of the work that they do.
And we have had those conversations with Ed's office and that, where if ultimately they're not, you could be viewed as a responsible bidder the next time. That's one of the real things that we've used in those conversations. Chair's point, it's a long project and everybody, is often bidding multiple jobs on it, but that's another conversation. And at the end of the day, that's only come up a couple times that I can think of, and people were able to correct it as best they can. Yep.
Yeah, it's been successful. And certainly in phase 2, it was successful.
So let's quickly go through some of our numbers as to where we are. So as of our reporting, which was on December 27th on our end, this is all the payroll and all the financial information that we received through December 15th, which means it's the work that was actually done up through the end of November. So if you look at it, on the workforce side, we've got just shy of 13,000 hours so far on this. So when you start to see, and we haven't started the construction yet. So minority work hours set for the month of November. Well, we'll go through the whole list of them, but if you look at the minority work hours, 6,700, non-minority women, 60 hours, non-minority males, 4,731. That's through October. We jump over to what was ultimately, and these are the numbers you'll start to see really start to grow here. Our November numbers of 757 for minority work hours, 43 hours for non-minority women, non-minority males, 564. And when you total that all up, we're at 12,867. Another thing that's important here, both on the workforce side and on the MWBE, you can't double count. So we make sure that if you're certified both as an M or a W, there is an election that what the credit is going to be on. So if it's $100,000 credit, it's a $100,000 contract, and whether it's being taken for the M or the W or the S or the D, you only get to count that once. Same way when we break out, if you have a minority female, we'll break out the categories. At the end of the day, we still tie it out to the full head count of everybody on the site to make sure that there's not be a double counting of that where we are on it. And then when we look at our comparison of goals, overall hours worked traditional. So here's is where we break it up, minorities, both male and female. We have a goal of 23%. We're at just over 58% all in right now. Women, non-minority, we have a goal of 7%. We're at 0.80. And then comparison overall hours worked for female participation when you combine it. So we have women, both minority and non-minority, majority, we're at a total of 18.4% against a goal of 7%. Our business participation, here's where we get into our MWBE and our small and advantage businesses. So based on contract award values to date of $57,859,000, keep in mind Kimberly's number, we wrote down roughly about 5.3 million we've paid out. So this is based on contract values, not what's ultimately paid out on it. But on the MBE, we have a goal of 18%. We're just under 35% with a contract value of $20,238,000. Our WBE, we have a goal of 12. We're currently at 5%, where we have a contract value to our WBEs of $2,912,000. Our SBE, a goal of 2%, and we are currently at 4.56 at $2,637,000. Our DBE, we have a goal of 2%. We are at 0.76 for 439,000. You notice these numbers have changed a little bit. We've now updated all of Savin numbers into this. We had conversations and working with Pepin as he continues to build out his participation and his numbers as to where we are. But keep in mind that it's only 5.3 million expended against the number of 57,859,000.
It's useful to see how we're going to report. The numbers on this chart are not that neat because the number of people, literally a couple of people, one way or the other, could change the way these numbers go. But it is useful because you get a sense of how the reporting will go.
And then just lastly, we track for this. It's not a requirement under the statute, but everyone's found it a valuable data point. Currently, there are three Rochester residents actively working on the project, which is 12.5% of the total of 25 individuals that are working on the project. You'll see that number, and then you'll start to see as construction builds out, what are the wages paid to that. So there's additional data points we go into construction that everybody will see.
Who are the firms that are reporting for this data? For the 25 member?
That would be all of the workforce completely for our service firms where we have people working. So anyone related to Savins that are on it, Anshin's in there, and then if the engineering and architectural firms have supplied their data, or the monthly data that they supplied. And you'll see that these numbers start to change quickly as we award more contracts and more people, and the percentages jump. And versus the opposite, when we get to the end of it, when we've got 1 million work hours in, the numbers don't move as significant as they're there. Do you have any questions? Appreciate everybody's time.
Okay. See, you're hearing nothing, I guess. Thank you very much. Pepin, project manager report.
Okay. We can start first with the overall program budget versus cost summary. There are no construction hard costs expended to date. As of last month, 5.8% of the total incidental budget is spent, which is about $6,495,004 paid to date. So until we have construction contractors on board, we won't see any change in the hard construction costs. Any questions? And also, Siobhan is working very obviously on developing the cost codes. And this is a sample of the budget tracking report that she's developing in our system. We will keep this as a monthly report to the board, but the executive board will get a copy of the details as Siobhan works with us on project site to get this in a granular.
This detail eventually goes into the accounting system for the Board of Education.
Yes, sir. This is your copy. So, in terms of submission for the rest of the report. We go back to the agenda. There's no word yet from the Office of the State Controller regarding the submission we made on our financial plan. They are most likely waiting for input from SED's Office of Facilities Planning before a final decision on this revised plan that was submitted in November is provided to us. Program verification reports were submitted to SED last month for both MLK Junior School number 9 and Wilson. We will submit Padilla Franklin's program verification report to SED after tonight's presentation by Terry, Labella, Troy, and Bruce. As soon as they're done, we will submit this report to the state different department. And based on my interaction with SED over the past few weeks, the state will not react on the program verification reports until a standard preliminary submission is made for each of the projects. So, and they want us to use their standard application for examination and approval of preliminary plans that they use for the entire state to calculate the cost allowances for each project in phase 3. So the preliminary submission requires gathering a voluminous amount of data from the school district, including a roster and floor plans of district buildings that are currently in service. We are working with Mr. Scott and Dr. Perry to collect some of that data and facilities also. They want us to put together revised instructional space review forms that need to be signed by the school superintendent, by Mr. Strickland, and the BOCES superintendent, and also the regional special ed associate. They want us to put together facility needs assessments. We've not done that in phase 2 or phase 1, but this is what they want as their standard. They also want updated demographics. We're working very closely with the district to collect a lot of this information. And our plan is to make the first submission to them with as much information that we can gather in day and night by this Friday for school number 9. So school number 9 schematic design continues. The estimate reconciliation is ongoing and will continue until tomorrow with the team here as we prepare for the submission this Friday. The Wilson commencement managed addition concept was accepted by the Washington School District's Facilities Department, and the team is moving forward into schematics. The existing structural conditions are being verified by the architect and the engineers. The team, I believe, Terry, are conducting destructive testing now.
February break, they've got plans to go in there and do some investigation, get it patched back up when the break is over, to come back in.
Yeah. So they need to expose the NK structural columns to see what's happening there and put this information on drawings. The schematic design remains on schedule for a January 29th completion, I believe, for them. And this will be followed by 3 weeks of estimating and budget reconciliation with the school district's facilities department. And the plan is to submit the schematic design to SED on February 27th. Padilla Franklin, Rowley, Coleman, and the Labella team made the final edits to the report, which I believe was shared with many other members here tonight. And Troy has flash drives to pass around when we're done. So the plan is to share this report to SED tomorrow as a courtesy. So hopefully they'll react to it as well. The CM agreement was sent to HITE for their review and signature before it gets signed by the board chairman and Ed as general counsel. Edison Tech, the contract agreement is in place with SDH. We worked out the indemnification and insurance issues with them. And Brian Pinnock spent a whole lot of time going back and forth with them and Ed Urian to get that resolved. And thank you for that. So we have a kickoff meeting scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, I believe. Is that right, Brian? Yeah, no, tomorrow afternoon with facilities and SDH to get that going. So, and also SDH is collaborating with some of the engineers the board has hired to make sure there's consistency and also to kind of use information that they're using from their study into the structural design when the time comes for Edison Bank. As far as procurement of professional services, we received 2 proposals for our architect of records for Edison Tech from Park Patterson and Copley. We received 2 proposals for CM services from Type and BCC. 2 proposals for commissioning agent consultancy services from Urban Anthony and IBC Engineering. Those proposals are being analyzed. We just got them this past Friday night. Interviews are being scheduled for the 23rd of this month. And we will have a recommendation for the board at the February meeting. We will select those consultants with the board's concurrence. We are having some discussions with the school districts, notably Mr. Scott, and we'll continue to have conversations about the logistics of the street space. And the board will have an update February meeting. PLA, as far as the project labor agreement, we are still reviewing a draft and other components of the PLA with Cedar and Lawley. The final decision regarding the use of the PLA will be needed by April 30th. And we'll continue to work with Lawley Insurance Services and Cedar to make sure we have a resolution on the differences we have in the agreement. Master schedule, Terry, I don't know if you're prepared to give a brief high-level update on where we are as far as updating it, but he's updating the schedule monthly with the team, with Rick Stoffel. Anything you want to highlight?
That's really easy this month. The updated schedule is on the wall. And the, from last month, it's really been just design activities. What Pepin's already reviewed as far as the PD reports and thematic progress has been made, has been updated into the schedule, and it maintains on schedule from last month as far as the submission plan to go to SCB. So, really easy update on the schedule.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. The last topic for this before we call in Terry and the Labella team and Bruce from Emmy. Is the callable refunding opportunity. We are working with the district, and I believe there's a meeting scheduled with the finance department and legislators to think about drafting a bill for that. So the plan is to see if we can refinance those bonds that are callable, especially the ones that are due on May 2025 or later. The district is taking the lead. The board chairman and I talked about this. We're waiting for the district to pick this up and work on a preliminary schedule with the legislators and see if we can get New York State to help us to refund a portion of the Series 2012 A bonds and the bonds that were that came with significant savings in the 2024 fiscal year. With that, Mr. Chairman, if you don't have any questions, I can call Terry.
Yeah, let's stop for a second here. Some of this process gets a little confusing. I'm going to make sure we all understand what we're talking about. Edison, the work at Edison is the work that's done with respect to this concerns about the structure of the building. We talked about that, but it's unique. It's unique to Edison, and in some senses unique in its project. Hopefully, whatever has to be done can be rolled into mostly into the project, but we don't know that. So that's a unique process. Our special engineer to do it, and it's going to be very important that we get to the bottom. In terms of the regular program, the program that we're talking about, the two things that we talked about here today, and that we're spending time on, one of them is the program verification, which you're going to hear about right now. One of the projects. That basically is an attempt to see, are we at a point now where the program that we originally conceived here can actually work in budgetary process? And there's been adjustments in there. The first step in the design, after you verify that it's credible, is the schematic, which is what he's also talking about. And that will be going on here. They can talk about it. But remember, we have these steps that we're required to go through here, every 25% basically. And the first of the 25% steps is the schematic design. It's the beginning of the design, basically. So that's what we've been talking about and all this work is about. And one of the things we want to share with you tonight, the work that's been done with respect to program verification. So, we've done.
So Troy,
Introduce your buddy.
So here we've got, first of all, Terry LeConte with Gilbane, part of the Savin Gilbane program management team. To my left is Troy Williams from Labella. He's the project manager. And we've got Bruce Knapp from M&E Engineering, principal at M&E. So what this is the program verification report, just the same way Tom had started out, to verify what was in the strategic plan, that program that was planned. There's a little more in-depth interviews and investigation done to verify that the program that was in the strategic plan can move forward into design. Troy will report on, what that process was, what came out of that, and where we stand. The next step after that is to move into schematics and actually, with the investigation that was done, a lot of the work that the architect, Troy and his team has done is actually started uncovering information into that phase. So it'll be easy to move in once we get through this phase, completing this report and getting it submitted to SED. So other than that, I'm just going to turn it over to Troy.
Sir. Good evening. So just brief overview of where we are at the Padilla High School at the Franklin campus. The campus itself is bordered on all sides by neighborhood streets. The importance of that we'll talk about here shortly. Parking has been assessed is deemed satisfactory, and the bus drop off on Hudson Avenue, as we've observed and has been expressed by all parties involved, seems to work well. However, by the campus's site, by SED's regulations and minimum standards are deemed to be insufficient. And as part of our submissions to the state, we'll need to submit a variance for the proposed phase 3 project. The total size of the campus.
Typically, what we've been seeing is that every one of the school buildings within the district will have that variance paperwork attached to the submission.
Well, the campuses were established before the guidelines were established.
So typically when I get a report, I like to flip to the back of it first and get the meat of the matter. So we're kind of spoiling it for you here. The subsequent report will kind of go in and follow along the budget reconciliation which took place. So we had the strategic plan. It was based on the billing aid units or the maximum cost allowance that is applied to the Padilla High School. You can kind of see there over on the right-hand side in the green what the dollar values are for construction versus incidentals. These numbers will have to be reconciled and approved by the state when we do our submission. I think Pepin already alluded to that, which will take place in the schematic design phase. Upon then, we will get a billing aid unit count, and a regional cost factor will be applied to it, and we'll get an overall dollar value in the state. As we went through the process of reconciling the strategic plan with current findings, our meetings with facilities, with the administrators, and reviewing everything that was outlined for scope. Some minor shortfalls were, let's say, uncovered. And the scope alignment with the budget that was set up netted out an approximate $4 million shortfall, which, given the scope and size of this project of about $110 million in construction, this is something that we see that we should be able to recoup or vet out as we go through the schematic design process.
Number wise, just to describe that in a little more detail, is as you mentioned, on 110 million being $4 million, call it over budget. At this concept stage is not unusual. A lot of square foot ideas of systems are being used now. Now it's close enough to get into the schematic phase where they'll get a little more detail to those systems where they can get better estimates. And what we would expect to come out of that is that they'll get it back down to budget and fine tune those scopes and fine tune those estimates so that by the time we're ready to submit to SED the schematics, we'll be down to budget to show them that we've hit the budgets.
Is that 4 million an aggregate, or is it one area that we're seeing, or is it just accumulated over the whole?
It's across it, and, there's certain systems, certain trades, there's a couple of trades that, are at the budget or a little under. With this particular scope, which, Troy will get into more detail after, a lot of infrastructure on this size building is huge. Between the roofing and the masonry, those are very large numbers.
One thing I'd like to accentuate, Ron, we were a lot higher than 4 million. It took a whole lot of work for us to get there, working with Mr. Scott's team at facilities to bring it down to 4.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I remember doing that a little later.
Right.
Something with ceiling.
And, this process is not unusual. You'll see it at every stage that they issue a set of drawings to review and do an estimate on. Many times it comes in over, and you make a decision on, how much of the design contingency gets folded. With design contingency is a contingency for work that's not designed yet, that you can't price because you don't see it on paper yet. So how much of that gets folded in based on the progress, and how accurate are those estimates based on what you're seeing, and then peeling that estimate back and the scope back to match the budget. It's a process that happens each and every time, and that's how you keep the project on budget by the time you go to.
Next slide, please. So upon receiving the initial report, the design team went through a process of verifying the base scope. This involved conducting several focus group meetings with different stakeholders. We had a large building advisory committee stakeholder meeting, and it gave the design team the opportunity to observe and identify the different wants and needs which were expressed by different teams at different times. And sometimes it was very informative to see all those stakeholders in the same room vying for the same dollars in the same space. As part of that, or in parallel, the design team would also go through and review existing conditions. What we went and did for Padilla, it's about a 500,000 square foot building, which is fully occupied. So as you can imagine, it's hard for us to get in at any point in time during the day to check things out. So we sent our crew through and we 3D scanned the entire facility So this is something that we have available at our fingertips anytime we want, like pull it up on the computer to look at the space, to check out measurements and so on. That was a very heavy lift in the beginning, but this will help us throughout the entire process moving forward and eliminating some of the unknowns like Terry was mentioning, and hopefully help us to free up dollars moving forward as we progress from one phase to the next. The next portion of our procedure was evaluating scope requests. There might have been some things that were on the original report that were reiterated in our meetings. There might have been some things that due to new changing technologies or changing trends that were requested in these meetings. These were all good things for us to take and evaluate. As Rolly would say, it's all good ideas seeking funding. But we took it all to heart and we evaluated it to base it on its merit and to see where it would fit in the budget. In reconciling the strategic plan and the wish list and the budget, like I mentioned before, there were some shortfalls identified. Some of it could have been because, well, some of it was because, you guys have a hard lift and having to get all these buildings to fit within that 475 million. There may have been some concessions that had to be made along the way. And, that's just the nature of things. So we went through, updated the cost model based on the information that we have as a design team, the architect of record, working along in partnership with ME Engineering and their vast knowledge of the systems that would need to go inside the building itself, along with the program manager. We then went through a painstaking process of prioritizing and at the same time reducing scope, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. So first, we started off with some of the wish list items that exceeded the budget right off the bat. The priorities maintained, which were outlined to the design team from the very beginning, were the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing infrastructure of the building, along with the building envelope, basically the roofs, the walls, make the system watertight, bring all the infrastructure up to 21st century code, energy efficiency, level of reliability. This is in turn key in order to set this building up for not only this project, but future projects down the road that, you're not spending good money after bad down the road. You're making things good from the very beginning.
On a normal job, it'd be in the 33% range. And it's another example on these projects in this phase, how much bigger the infrastructure is.
Yeah, for example, this building will be taking out entire systems, all wiring, all plumbing, except for the ones that have been recently replaced. Most, if not all, the mechanical. There is some that was recently done as well in some spaces.
Troy,
Sir?
once you get past the MEP, then you've got the general trades. And when you look at the big ticket items in that, the roof and the masonry, those are going to be huge dollars as well. So there's a lot of pressure to get the building overall stabilized.
So along with the MEP infrastructure replacement, all the ceilings in the areas affected will also be replaced. The strategic plan, in summary, accommodated for about 325,000 of the almost 500,000 square feet of building. The newly reconciled plans that you're about to see will show about 119,000 square feet of building area being reconstructed at some level.
Because that's in reconfigured space. The MEP systems are really throughout the whole building. So we'll be constructing and reconstructing throughout almost every square foot of that building through the replacement of the MEP system.
So all the classrooms will have updated lighting, electrical, HVAC, air conditioning. A lot of the spaces just won't be reconfigured, and we'll be working closely with the district to identify which spaces, moving walls and so on. So as part of the original strategic plan and talking with the facilities and administrator, the overall goal of this facility is to be a heavy or develop a strong science, art, and CTE focused program. We prioritize those spaces looking through the program. Those are the ones we identified that would require the most cost in order to renovate, reconstruct. And we look through and see where we could best accommodate them. So current scope of work, approximately 4 million over budget. On an acceptable, like Tara mentioned already, acceptable 110 million. So if we move forward now, we can. So the plans as they are currently configured to receive some level of reconstruction. The red, starting with the red with the smallest areas, will be the toilet rooms that aren't currently up to code. Then you have the light renovation, light rehabilitation, which will be all the hallways and new floor finishes, paint, new ceilings, and so on. And then the brownish color there would be heavy rehabilitation. Those are the CTE classrooms, labs, science classrooms, labs, art classrooms, along with the pool area. Next slide, please. So, to our previous comment on the dollar value and the breakdown, it's pretty 50-50 split, which is slightly uncommon.
One big building.
It is.
Yeah.
Is there any hazardous abatement that big number in this building?
There is absolutely a hazardous abatement component to this scope of work, which we've the general trades 45% here. Throughout the process of leveling out our estimates, moving through the design phases, we will be identifying add alternates to try to get back some of that scope that was kind of peeled back and have it put back into the project. That as we move through design, we have it incorporated, submitted to the state, having it approved, and throughout the bidding process, if the dollar values allow to get that scope actually built. So what's our upcoming schedule? Pretty hectic. We've got schematic design due to the estimators, which will be the construction manager, Mike. That'll be on March 7th. From there, they have between March 7th and the 27th to put together their reconciled estimate. They'll be working along with Labella's internal estimating team just to make sure that we're checking each other's numbers. And then we'll have a design update back to you guys on the 14th. SED review, all the documents to SED for review, which will be a preliminary review of the schematic design, March 28th, and we're hoping that they can get through it by the 10th of April. Questions?
Anything else? Questions, comments? Hard to believe that one of the records you made, they're fighting over space. It's hard to imagine they're in space.
You'll find, even though the buildings are big enough to handle the population of students, schools spread out. There's space available, they'll spread out into it.
Actually, the challenge is that what spaces below get moderate or heavy ventilation reconstruction.
The masonry that you referred to is like,
Break
you're gonna repoint the building?
It's a combination of brick and stone, caulking, repointing, some of the parapets, they need some rebuilding. There was some thoughts that there was water infiltration at parapets that may be infiltrating into the roofing. So it's a combination of creating a watertight. Envelope closure.
It's an attractive building architecture.
Oh, it's beautiful building.
Yeah. And some of the inside is very interesting too. You know, walking straight in from the front door through the lobby and then even right into the auditorium. That's a beautiful auditorium. And I think it's one of the largest ones within the county. Real estate. Yeah. Okay, thank you, folks.
Well, that concludes our hearing report.
Any questions for Pepin? How about general comments? Anything that's on anybody's mind you'd like to bring up or ask us to pursue? Well, okay.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. We'll stand adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it possible, I know, Commissioner Simmons, Camille Simmons, I wanted to introduce her to the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
As our.
Guys.
Hey, guys.
Guys.
Hang on a minute. Yeah, hang on.
Wanted to, use, Commissioner, Simmons, for president, board president. The Rochester City School District, so I just wanted to welcome her, to the meeting today.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Governor Scott, I call him. Thank you for the introduction. I'm not going to keep you. I know this has been a very long meeting, but I do appreciate the information. I have a better understanding of all of the nuances that go into this very complicated project. So I really appreciate your commitment. So I'll be learning as I go, but I do have some of the documents. So I'm sure I'll have questions as we continue, but thank you for the opportunity to say hello, and hopefully I can be in person at some point.
Well, we're looking forward to having you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Happy New Year.
Take care.
But we still need it. Here or?